It was found at the Iron Museum in Enterprise, Oregon. It's a heavy iron device, clearly built for real work, and the whole thing is driven by a small hand crank on one side. Across from the crank is a fixed handle built into the frame, almost like it was meant to be held steady while the shaft and wheel were turned. No markings, no labels, and even the museum owner had no idea what it once did. Any idea what this thing is? This is a hand-operated sheep shearing machine, the kind a farmer would set up in a shed before electricity ever reached the countryside. A long handle turns the big flywheel and its smaller companion, sending power down the narrow arm where the combs and blades slide back and forth to cut wool cleanly. The three-legged base keeps the whole thing steady while the operator works, and the multiple combs and blades mean it could keep going through long shearing days without stopping for sharpening. Machines like this were built for real, hard use during the sheep farming boom, and this particular design came from R.A. Lister and Company of Dursley, Gloucestershire, one of the early 20th century manufacturers that helped shift shearing from hand shears to mechanical power. It was found in a thrift store, just a metal contraption bolted onto a piece of old wood with two wheels linked by a belt. At the front, there's a long tube that looks a bit like the nose of a hand-cranked blower or some kind of air tool, but nothing on it gives away its purpose. The seller had no idea what it was for, and the setup looks homemade or heavily modified. Any idea what this thing is? This is a 19th century wooden and copper hand-crank fireplace bellows, the kind a homeowner would keep beside the hearth when fire was the only source of heat. A small crank spins the internal wheel, pushing air through the narrow copper nozzle to bring a weak flame back to life without ever having to bend down and blow. The wooden body holds the air chamber, the copper trim keeps the edges tight and protected, and the steady crank lets you deliver a long, controlled stream of air that simple hand-squeeze bellows could never match. These wheel-driven bellows were a clever upgrade in their day, often built by metalworkers who specialized in fireplace equipment during the late 1800s. It was seen in passing at a nephew's baptism, just a small hand-crank gadget about a foot long with a surprisingly strong gear ratio. The odd cup on the end doesn't spin at all. The only part that actually moves is the little post at the tip of the main shaft, and it spins fast for such a tiny crank. No markings, no clues, just a compact mechanism that feels like it once had a very specific purpose. Any idea what this thing is? This is a VD massage vibrator, a hand-powered stress reliever from the early 1900s, when personal wellness gadgets were just beginning to appear in homes. You turn the side handle to spin the mechanism, and that motion made the front disc pulse through a rubber pad, giving a steady vibrating massage wherever you pressed it. The little wheel on the body let you choose how gentle or intense you wanted the vibration to be, depending on how much tension you were trying to work out. These early massage devices were surprisingly popular in their time, especially after Jan van Tuyl Daniels patented the design in London in the early 1900s. Helping kick off that whole wave of mechanical home massagers. It was found inside a cabinet that once held what looked like a turntable and a back bracket, and the whole thing centers around a hand-cranked motor. When the crank is turned, it winds up but doesn't activate anything on its own, and only when the little front lever is pushed do the metal weights spin and bring the whole gear train to life. It runs surprisingly smooth and strong, almost like a precision mechanism, and the layout even hints at some Clockwork influence, though nothing confirms that. With no markings and a design that feels almost custom, it really does seem like a one-off piece. Any ideas what this thing is? This is the motor from an Edison standard phonograph, the kind of spring-driven engine that kept those early wax cylinder recordings spinning at a steady pace. You wound it up by hand, let the spring tension build, and the gears inside would regulate the speed so the music or spoken word played smoothly, without wobble. These motors were small but powerful, built to run an entire cylinder through on a single wind, and you could actually watch the governor spin as it controlled the tempo. It comes from the era when Thomas Edison's wax cylinder machines were the cutting edge of home entertainment, turning recorded sound into something families could finally listen to in their own living room. It was found in a shed and looks like a clamp-on tool with a spinning component built into the frame. The body is metal, and it's clearly designed to lock onto a bench or table before use. One side has a simple hand crank, and turning it sends the wheel on the opposite end spinning. The wheel itself looks like it could be sisal or possibly stacked cardboard, the kind meant for light abrasion or polishing rather than cutting. Any ideas what this thing is? This is a hand crank bench grinder with a polishing wheel, the kind of tool someone would mount to a workbench to sharpen knives, touch up chisels, or buff small metal parts long before electric grinders became common. You'd turn the side crank to spin the wheel, giving you full control over the speed so you didn't overheat or damage the edge you were working on. Tools like this were quiet, steady, and surprisingly precise, which is why they stayed in barns and workshops for decades. It was given to a friend and appears to be some sort of fiber processing tool. The hand crank operates a wooden worm cam with a 1:2 ratio, which in turn drives the top spindle at a 1:4 ratio. Above the bare crankshaft, there's a slot about 1.5 inches wide, lined with metal, possibly meant to guide or hold material. The tool seems incomplete, and it's likely a few parts are missing, making its full function hard to determine. Any idea what this might have been used for? This is a tool for making yarn tangles, used to prepare yarn for knitting or weaving. You turn the lever to spin the yarn onto a bobbin-like cylinder, and once the right amount has been wound, the tool makes a snapping sound to signal it is ready. Devices like this were valued for keeping yarn organized and manageable, making the work of knitters and weavers smoother and more efficient. It was found in an inherited toolbox from a beach house, heavily rusted from years of exposure. It's a hammer-like tool. The top of the hammer has a small groove, and there appears to be a tiny blade attached with a screw that allows adjustment of the blade's length. Any ideas what this tool could have been used for? This is a roofing or shingler hatchet, a specialized tool used by roofers to install wooden shingles. One side of the head has a hammering surface for driving nails, while the opposite side typically features a sharp hatchet blade for trimming and shaping shingles to fit. Roofers would carry it on a belt or in a pouch, allowing them to alternate quickly between cutting and nailing as they worked across a roof. Tools like this were essential in traditional roofing, combining two functions into one handy, portable instrument that saved time and effort on the job. It was found in an old workshop and appears to be a wooden, hand-powered machine from China. The device has a top-loading chute and a hand crank, which makes it resemble a small cotton gin. However, given the size of the chute and China's historical context with cotton, it might have been intended as a clothing or textile washer instead. Any idea what this machine was actually used for? This is a rice grain thresher, a hand-operated machine designed to separate rice kernels from their husks after harvesting. Grain would be fed into the top, and as the handle was turned, internal mechanisms would beat or rub the stalks to release the rice. Small threshers like this were common in rural settings where families needed an efficient way to process their harvest without relying on large powered equipment. And they represent a practical approach to food preparation that has been used for generations in many parts of Asia. It was found in the crawl space of an old house and is a small old metal wind-up device, roughly 4 by 4 inches. The top has a little key, and it appears to have contained a coiled spring inside. Any idea what this could have been used for? This is the drive mechanism from an antique toy car, the part responsible for transferring motion from the winding or clockwork motor to the wheels. Typically, a spring or geared system would store energy when wound, then release it to make the car move across the surface.